Welcome to the BMO IFFSA International Film Festival's Masterclass with Shabana Azmi. This is the centenary year of celebrations of Satyajit Ray. Welcome Shabana ji, Shabana Masterclass. Begin with Satyajit Ray then. You worked with Satyajit Ray in the film Shatranj Ke Khiladi, the chess players. What was your experience working with Satyajit Ray to begin with?
It was like no other. Because I remember when I got a call and there was this big booming voice, and the phone was given to him and he said, you know, I'm so and so and I'd like to work in your film. The phone almost fell down from my hand and I couldn't believe it. Before he called me, Shama Zaidi called me to say that Ray would like to cast you in his film. And of course it was completely unbelievable for me. Anyway, I said yes, of course, without asking for anything. When the producer gave me the contract, I didn't bother to look at it. I just signed. And then what happened was that we were at the Tehran Film Festival, where I was a member of the jury. And I met him at an evening dinner and sort of expected that he would tell me something about the role. But he didn't refer to the film or the role at all. And I found it very strange that, you know, I don't know anything about the part, what is going to happen anyway. Much later, I realized that this was not Satyajit Ray's style to talk, work at an informal gathering of friends. I let it be at that. Now, on the day that I was supposed to shoot, I had turned up at the studios in a t-shirt and jeans like I used to wear in those days. And he had one look at me. I shook his hand. His handshake wasn't very warm. And he looked at me and he said, why don't you go and get ready? And then I'll come and speak to you in the green room. Now that made me even more nervous because I said, my God, I don't know what he wants from me. And then I realized, as I was wearing my clothes, I realized that suddenly my posture had started changing because of the Begum's clothes, etc. I had, you know, suddenly unconsciously, my posture was changing. And then he came in and he said, yes. So see, if I had talked to you while you were in your jeans and your t-shirt, you would still have been in the mindset of that urban teenager that you are. And I wanted you to get into the character even before I spoke to you. So I said, okay. And then he said, we'll do the more difficult scene earlier. And of course, you can't protest when it's Ray talking to you. But I was really scared. And I said, all right. And then when we went on the set, I remember my first take. And he said, very good. And can we take one more? And then he came up to me and he said, you know, it's very good what you're doing. But do you think we can break up the dialogue into part complaint, part anger, part recrimination? And then I suddenly realized just that one little note from him suddenly changed the whole thing for me. And of course, I realized what he was saying was right. And so I went ahead with it. And then it was quite obvious that he was satisfied with what he got. And so then I felt more confident. Then after that, I had actually only 3 days work with Manikda. And I noticed that he worked with me and Saeed Jaffrey in a completely different way from the way he was working with Sanjeev Kumar. He was giving very close instruction to Sanjeev Kumar, even saying that, you know, you should raise your hand so much from your chest because I'm getting you in silhouette. And so I need to see a clear distinction. He was even marking that for him. And he left both Saeed Jaffrey and me more or less on our own. And I think that must have been a factor of us knowing the language. anyway, ho gaya said Shatranj Ki Khiladi. I had no idea that, just a 3-day part would get me so much acclaim, but it continues to this day. And after that, I kept telling him, I said, you have to cast me in another film. You can't just give me such a small part. And he said, well, if I make a Hindi film, I'll definitely cast you. Unfortunately, that day was not to be, but I still hold it very, very close to my heart that in his book, their films, our films, he describes my work in Ankur, in Shyam Benegal's Ankur, and he says, in that last scene, Shabana Azmi pulls out all the stops and establishes herself as one of the finest actresses in Indian cinema. That to me is too good to be true even today. So I do rue the fact that I wasn't able to work with him more. But of course, the fact that I can tick off the list and say, yes, I worked with Ray in itself is a very, very big thing for an actor like me.
Yeah. So how is it, like as an actor, of course, you are a trained actor. So you prepare yourself, you get the script and then you read and then you prepare. And then you go on the set. So was there any difference in how you had planned to do the role? How he...
Yes, I just gave that example. You see, because I'm a trained actor and I'm from the Film Institute, and I know that for an actor, it's extremely important to know your lines. So like Roshan Taneja used to say, my acting teacher used to say, learn your lines so that they don't come in the way of the emotion when you're giving the shot. And so what I did was, it tended to be like one long complaint. And he broke that up into bits. And that's why I made it so much more interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What Ray said about you on Ankur, because that was my second question your relationship with Shyam Benegal and also your first film, which was released. Of course, you had worked on 2 other films by then. You had been trained as an actor at the Film Institute. Of course, you had a background which was very different from the role of Lakshmi, which you were portraying. So how did you prepare for that role of Lakshmi Ankur?
I was a Bombay city girl who had never stepped into a village in my life. And so just the experience of going into that village, which was Yella Reddy Guda, about 20 miles from Hyderabad, was really daunting for me because it was something that I had never ever experienced in my life. And so what Shyam Benegal did is he asked me to wear the clothes of Lakshmi. She's somebody who wears a sari much higher than you do in urban India, and a very short pallu. And he said, just walk around the village in these clothes before we started shooting. And so I remember I did that. And then there was a scene where I have to, pound the mirchi. And I couldn't do it because there's a certain rhythm to it. And so all the village women who would look at me would laugh and say, what's the point in you being so educated? You can't even get this right. And then they teach me to do it. And slowly I started becoming friends with the women in the village. And that helped me. So by the time I came on set, I was comfortable in the sari and everything. But this is an incident I repeat very often, but I think it bears repetition. I had a very difficult time sitting on my haunches. I couldn't sit on my haunches. And if you see the film now, you'll see that there's a lot of scenes happening when I'm sitting on the floor, on my haunches. And so Shyam said, all right, now you're not going to be able to sit with us at the dining table and eat with us. So you sit in that corner and you sit on your haunches and you eat there. So of course I did as he told me. A couple of college boys who were wandering around came and they looked at me and they said, oh, where's the heroine? So I said, it's her chutti, she hasn't come today. So they looked at me and said, so what are you doing? So I said, I'm playing the ayah. Oh, they said, okay, okay. And they moved away. Now Shyam Benegal was watching me from a corner. And then he called me and he said, see, you've managed to convince those boys who you are. So now you've earned your place and now you can sit and eat with us. And I cannot tell you how important that was for me. Otherwise, every shot would have been a struggle.
Yeah. But, when we get trained as an actor, of course, the whole focus is on imagination. And then we prepare even the background of characters. When we read a script, it's all in the imagination. But when we work, especially like roles like this, Lakshmi, which is so different from your background. So do you think that in training, in acting training, this should also be a part where, actors should go and spend time with people, observe people, and then also, bringing this habits into their practice, because of course, as an actor, then what you have to do, it has to translate into an action. Like you spoke about pounding the mirchi or sitting on your haunches. So it's this hidden experience of the character, which you can imagine, but it doesn't translate when you work. So
no, but what you're learning at the institute is so important, because what you learn at the institute is that the actor is her own instrument. And so she has to work on her body, she has to work on her voice, she has to work on her mind. And she has to hone her own instrument. Like, if you are a sitar player, then how well you play depends on the dexterity of your fingers, as well as how finely tuned the sitar is. But the actor is her own instrument. And that's why she has to be totally and completely flexible. So all that we learn at the institute, we learn dance, we learn horse riding, we learn yoga, all that is to make the body of the actor completely flexible. It is impossible to say that during your 2 years of training, you should also be trained in the various kinds of walks that human beings have, because then there would be no end to what would be required. So you're given the basic tools, and the basic tools, one of them before imagination is observation. And that to me is very important, because I think an actor has to be very, very observant. And in order to be very observant, what becomes very important is for the actor to be connected to life. So if I sit in an auto rickshaw, if I travel by bus, if I travel by train, I get the opportunity to observe characters who are completely different from my class. And I think that's very, very important. Now, if I take it to a further level, I always say that an actor's resource base has to be life itself. You have to be connected with life. What happens, because when you're connected with life and then you look at everything around, you look at the politics of what is happening, you look at the injustice of the haves and the have-nots, you look at the system that creates some haves and many have-nots, and then you ask the question, why? And if you ask the question why, then at some level you start to get involved with wanting to change that. I grew up in an atmosphere where my parents believed that art should be used as an instrument for social change. And that, plus the fact that I chose to become an actor, I think makes me connected to life. What I notice is in the process of becoming a star, you start losing your connect with life, because you are surrounded by a concentric circle of people who the outsider needs to go through before they reach you. So in order to reach a star, you have to go through the security guard, then you have to go through the makeup person, then the hairdresser, then the secretary, and so many people, you have no connect left with the star. And the star moves around in a bubble of like-minded people and loses her connect with life. And I think that is something that we have to really, really be careful to safeguard. I remember asking Kevin Spacey this question, and he said that even to date, this was before he was accused of Me Too and all that. He said, even to date, I take the tube in New York, and I sort of wear a hoodie and stuff like that, so people don't immediately recognize me, but I'm hearing voices, I'm observing people, and I do that as discipline for myself. And I think that's very important for an actor.
Yeah, that's good you stated that. I'll come to this question again towards the end, where you talk about how an actor has to be invested in the contemporary life, also what's happening around to the injustices. Because we all know that you are also a social activist, and your role has been phenomenal for different types of causes. But let me come back to other film of Shyam Benegal, which is Mandi, where you a character of Rukmini Bai, who's the head of brothel. So it's very interesting that from the role of Lakshmi to the role of Rukmini Bai, which are like two contrasting roles. But here, this role it's loud, but yet it's carrying towards the other sex workers there. And then also like dealing with the marketplace and the changes which are happening around. And also in the sense, it's also theatrical, the whole performance, the whole the setting of the film. So how, let's talk about the performance also, how did you prepare and what was the experience working with Shyam Benegal?
First I was concerned that I was too young to play the Madame of the Brothel. And so I discussed it with Shyam and I said, what can I do? And so I suggested, shall I put on weight? And he said, well, if you can, then that's a good thing. So I put on 12 kilos for that film. So my gait and everything changed because I put on so much weight. But that's the external. Now, what I did is I visited personally 3 different kinds of brothels. I visited a brothel in Bombay. And if you please, Farooq Sheikh and Aziz Nazam, there was a Qawwali singer. They took me to that brothel. And it was called Pila House. And I was very surprised to find that actually they dressed like a very popular film star of those times. So there was a particular kind of neckline that she used to wear. And she used to wear dark red lipstick and she wear thin eyebrows. And they were all dressed like that film star. And they were pretty young people. And so I got a flavor of that. Then I went to Delhi. And Amrita Singh's mother, Roxana Sultan, told me that, all right, I'll take you to GB Road. Now, GB Road had a completely different flavor because it was more, it was more the courtesanship, where there was a lot of ada and there was aap tashrif rakhiye or aap gilori khaiye, and it was, I could understand why that kind of courtesan was often taken to train the Nawabs in the niceties of culture. I could understand that. And they were very friendly with the Roxana Sultan, and she was very kind to them, etc. So I got that. And now when I went to Hyderabad, I went with Shyam Benegal to a place called Hari Mandi, I think it's called. And there the girl that I saw just took my breath away because she was barely 5 foot. I mean, she was really tiny. She was very slim. She had not an ounce of makeup on her face. She was wearing a green nylon sari and a white blouse. And her demeanor was like very shy. She would, all the time that I was talking to her, her eye was downcast. And then I said, okay, would you do a dance for us? And she got up and she did a really raucous number on a song of mine, which is almost a devotional song. Puja karungi teri, hoke rahungi teri. So I said, oh my God, this is a completely different interpretation from what I had done in Fakira. But she did it and then finished it and then went back to being that woman with the downcast eye. And I realized that it was a pure performance for her. It hadn't seeped into her private life. It was just a performance that she was doing. And then I asked her, I said, why do you do this? And she took me to the back of that place and she showed me that she was looking after her entire family. Her father who was paralyzed, her mother, and she had lots of sons and daughters. And I really felt that it was like the sob story that one hears. You know, so all these three experiences were so completely different for me. And I think an amalgamation of the three of them helped me to form the character in Rukmani Bai. I remember the first shot we did was in that Maulali when I'm walking in the sari with the umbrella, and something just happened and I did a certain walk and I knew that that walk had worked. So for Monday, I said the actors have two ways of working outside. Either they work from the outside in or the inside out. So Rukmani came from working outside in. So putting on weight, deciding a walk for her, all that came first, and then I started looking inside her. But there are several other roles that I've done where I've just gone inside and then slowly come outside. So the process, Pushpendra, of me entering the world of another character has always been very, very interesting, because sometimes I just put a foot in through the doorway. Sometimes I just open the window and then close it. Sometimes I go charging in straight into the drawing room. What makes me make those choices, I don't know. Obviously, it's something that the character tells me, but it is an independent way of doing it. And so I cannot tell you that this is the way I approach every character. It's the character that makes me decide how I should, because inhabiting the world of a character completely different from you has to be based, like you said, on observation, on imagination, on stimuli, in how closely you're connected to life. So many things.
And how is your working relationship with Shyam Benigan?
I think it's the best. It's the best relationship that one can have between a director and an actor. Shyam loves his actors, and he works very hard on earning their confidence. So what happens with Shyam Benigal? He will never tell me, do this in this particular way. So he will let me take wings and fly. But I know that if I'm going too far, or if I'm making a fool of myself, Shyam will rein me back. And that gives me the confidence to do more things, to experiment more. If I have an uncomfortable relationship with the director, then I feel that, all right, I know that if the camera's close on my face and if I just look up like that, it will look very effective. I don't have to do more than that. So I will work with what has worked in the past. With Shyam, the actor takes risks, because you know that the director will, rein you in if you're going too far. And that is wonderful. It's a relationship of real trust between the actor and the director. And that's not only with me, that's with all the actors he works with.
Great. Now I'll come to, the film called Par, for which you also won the national award. It's, you play this character of Rama, which is the story and the life is steeped in poverty. And then because of circumstances, then you move to a big metropolis. And then, poverty, does such things. But what was interesting for me to watch also was that it was also a very physically demanding role, in the whole film as a process. And I'll come to one of my favorite shots later on. But, I want to hear from you. What was your process for dealing with Rama, preparation for Rama and this physical demand for the role?
Well, the physical demand was to lose weight. And because I was pregnant in the film, I didn't have to lose as much weight as Nasir. I mean, Nasir is really just bones. Then what happened is that I am a decent swimmer. Nasiruddin Shah can't swim.
Yeah.
We were told that we would get a swineherd who would be directing us as we crossed the Ganges. When the swineherd turned up, he was about 99 years old. And he was almost blind and he could barely speak. So wherever you made him sit, he would sit and then he would just say, and Nasir went completely mad and he said, what is he doing? I said, Nasir, be happy that he's even breathing. Now, this is the swineherd we've got. We can't do anything about it. So he got really, really nervous. Now, what happened is when we were going to do that scene, just as we were about to begin, one of the pigs got caught in a little whirlpool there and died right there. That cannot inspire great confidence in you, right? Just as you're starting, there's a pig who's caught in the whirlpool. And so it was very frightening. But something happens with actors. I think when the camera's on and when they're in the moment, and they take many, many more risks than they would do otherwise. It was very physically very, very strenuous. But again, Taneja Saab's words keep coming back to me. An actor is her own instrument. An actor is her own instrument. She has to keep her body fit to be able to play the part. But I remember once I had read in the script that at one point, Rama and Nasir, I can't remember his name now, while they're swimming,
Naurangia.
Huh?
Naurangia.
So she almost puts her chin on the butts of the swine, and instead of 36, they look like 38 pigs. This line just had made, just the penny had clicked with that. So at one particular time, I just jumped into the water. And I did exactly that. I jumped into the water and I came very close to the rump of the pigs. And unfortunately, we couldn't keep that shot because I hadn't warned the director and the focus became soft.
Yes.
I feel very, very, very bad about that because it had just, the penny had dropped, that that's how we needed to look. So obviously everything about Par was difficult, but basically it was the symbol of them being able to cross the Ganges, which was what the film was about. Now, this is again a story I'll tell you, which I've recounted several times, but I think it's of great importance. How I normally work is by trying to find a character who is as close to the character that I am playing, so that I can use that character as a model. We were living in Naihati. We were living in a colonial guest house. And there was this girl who was sweeping the floors. So I was watching the way she was also from Bihar. And I was watching the way she was sweeping and how she would squat to eat. And I was watching all that. And then sometimes she and I got talking and we became friends. So she said, Didi, will you come to my house? And I said, of course. And I went to her house. And I had never seen poverty of the kind that I saw in her hut, because there was no air, there was no light. There were 8 people living in that 200 square feet room. And it really, really struck me that somebody who was living in such dire straits had the generosity to be my friend, and that she was still smiling and she was okay with it. And I was so seized by that. And I felt that if I go back to Bombay and don't do anything for the kinds of people that Rama is, then it would be a travesty of the trust that she had placed in me while we became friends. I couldn't say that I will use you to maybe win an award in the process and then go back to Bombay and forget about you. I felt very seized by her. And just at that time, when I came back to Bombay and I was feeling, really, really charged by wanting to do something for her, I happened to watch Anand Patwardhan's film, Bombay, Our City, which brought into focus for me that demolitions of slums serve no purpose. They only create worse slums out of already existing slums. And that's how I joined the organization Nivara Haq, which means the right to shelter. And then worked with them, went on a hunger strike with the Nivara Haq comrades. And today we have built homes for 50,000 people in Chandivli who were demolished from the Borivali National Park. And all this we have done for free. They literally just paid 7,500 rupees to get these flats. And I remember one old man crying when we gave him the key to the flat, and he said, मेरे माथे पे जो कलंक था कि मेरा बेटा झोपड़पट्टी में रहता है, you've taken that away and you've given us dignity. And I said, no, I have not given you dignity. It's your struggle and what you have done. But it made, what can I say? It moved me very deeply. And that's how I got involved in activism. That's what happens, I think, with actors.
Yeah, we see, like all great actors, we've seen Brando, fighting for the cause of the native Indians. Marlon Brando, he returned the Oscar. So, there's a saying which I like a lot, that to be a good actor, you need to be a good human being first. So
I don't think that's necessary. Oh, by the way, I don't think that's necessary. I think I have known of this thing that you have to be. I'm not saying that I'm a good human being. No. You have to be sensitive. Sensitive is different from being. I think that in order to be a good artist, you have to be a good human being. I don't think is necessary, because I've known some pretty rotten people who are really good at their job. So I think that's just a romanticized idea. The fact I work.
Exceptions prove the rule. Yeah.
Pushpendra, I think of myself as a social animal. And that's because I grew up in a commune. Till the age of 9, I lived in a commune of the Communist Party of India. My father was a card-holding member. And of course, that shaped my ideals. So I grew up in an atmosphere where gender justice was given, social justice was given, where a celebration of India's composite culture was given. So it really was handed to me on a platter. Now, children don't learn by you talking to them. Children learn by example. And that's what I saw my parents doing. And so that's how I became. The credit to good people, I don't necessarily, I wish it were true, but I'm not necessarily agreeing to that.
Yeah, but my favorite actors, like which come to my mind, like Nasiruddin Shah, you, Balraj Sahni, Irfan Khan. So, I've interacted with three of them, and of course, studied a lot about Balraj Sahni. And all four, I know that they're good human beings. They do a lot of good work also.
Oh, Balraj Sahni was a member of the Communist Party. And let me tell you one thing. When Balraj Sahni was doing Garm Hawa, which was written by my father and Chama Zaidi, he was a bit nervous about, will I be able to do this part? Will I be able? And our mother, who had been his co-star in many places, said, of course you will be able to do it. So he said, I don't know any person like that. So then my mother suggested, and a family that lived in, that name will come to me, I can't remember, it's about 15 miles away from Bombay. And he went and lived for 10 days in that family where he was a big star, but he was living on the charpai of that family because he wanted to feel. So he was that kind of actor. He was a different actor from the others in his generation.
Yes, MS Satyusa was in FTI, and he was giving this example that when he was in Agra, actually. So, he organized the shoe workers, and also led to a protest for their rights.
Yeah.
So phenomenal, like an actor doing that.
Yeah.
So of course, now coming back to Par, there are two scenes which I like most. One is a close when you have this conflict where you see the river, and then Naurangia says that we have to take the pigs across the river, and then initially you deny, and then you also give the reason about the child that you're pregnant. But of course, poverty is there, and you have to earn. And then there's this sudden close-up where we see, you give a stare at Nasiruddin Shah, and then you decide, and then we see it's a wide shot, and then you are walking down. And also the last shot of the film, where you say that the child is not moving, and then Naurangia comes and he puts his head on your bed, and he's trying to listen, and then he gives this news that no, it's moving, and you are like crying, and then suddenly there's this reaction. It's so amazing as like watching those two shots, where as a director and as an actor also, what I realize is that as actors, what people tend to do is it's like usually one emotion which they feel, but there you can see that like you're like moving between 2-3 emotions, this conflict, and then in the end also there is this crying, but then also you feel this relief that the child is alive. How do you manage that?
I think it comes from the script a lot. A lot of it really comes from how well written that is. And if you look at that scene has the history of what has just happened with these people as they cross that huge river and returning home because they were thrown out, they had run out of the city in search of work. And then this was the work that was given to them. And so there's so much history behind that I think that you are able to absorb. And I'll tell you an interesting thing. Par was shot on location, and this particular scene was shot in a studio. I can't remember whether the studio was in Calcutta or in Bombay. And so, in disparate situations, you have to get the sur correct. This was something that Taneja Saab always taught. He said that it will not be an ideal situation where you will do everything at one go. And they'll start sometimes with a very difficult scene first. Sometimes they let a scene go right in the middle and then 6 months later, you have to pick it up. तो उसका जो सुर है, अगर आप समझ सकते हो, then it happens. But I'm not able to really tell you that there was a technique behind it. It was just that I keep मेरी मिट्टी गीली होती है और क्या बोल सकती हूँ, I can't say anything else. You know, it does something. Because the moment that you are recreating is not only a moment, it is within a historical and social context and the experience of where your life has been at that time. And that, if you're not trying really desperately hard, if you're not trying to be clever, if you're trying to be truthful, now I understand when Taneja Sahab also used to always say, go for the truth. Go for the truth. उस वक्त मेरी समझ में नहीं आता था what go for the truth is. But I think it's going for the truth of that moment that allows this to happen.
Is there a role of the director also? Like, because he's setting the close-up and like, does he, Gautam Ghosh was the director, so did he give sense or did he allow you to like come up with whatever
you know, I'm not being falsely modest, but if I have ever given a good performance, the director in great measure is responsible for it. The writer, the director, and your co-actor.
Yeah.
They are responsible. So I always say that, you know, film acting is such a collaborative job. I just cannot sit pretty and say that I got this right. Arey, you got it right, what? There are a whole host of people around you that are enhancing your strengths and covering up your weaknesses, because of which you are being able to, the light shines on you. Because see, if the director decides that he wants to keep this whole thing in long shot, तो मैं कुछ भी कर लूं, आप तो देख नहीं सकते थे उसको. So where the camera is placed, what is the focus of the director? All that is very important. And sometimes as an actor, I can be very selfish and I can say that, please have the camera on me. But the director knows the whole context and can put me against a window in which I'm completely silhouetted and then create a magic of that moment by not even going to my face. So really, 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 I think in films, the director is the master of the show.
Yeah, it's very interesting because that brings me to Mrinal Singh and the film Khandar. You know, when I saw the film in FTI once it was screened, it wasn't a good print, but then I revisited it again on YouTube. Again, it wasn't a good print. But what fascinated me was how you know, Mrinal Singh uses this the ruins of the house and the mother and the daughter in the ruins, but also interestingly your relationship with the space. So you know, the way you're always stationed against a wall or moving. When you're moving, you're just, you know, sliding your hand against the wall and moving. And then whenever you enter the doors or there are windows or there are objects in the house, you're very attached to them. We can see that, you know. And also, you know, against the stationary, the static of the house, he uses a movement a lot. So you're constantly in motion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they're very interesting. But then again, you know, what fascinated me about your performance in Khandar was, you know, the way you built your performance, in the sense that, you know, your gaze is mostly cast downwards, and then your spine is very movable, very flexible. So sometimes when you're sitting on the bed or when you're sitting somewhere, you know, it's very dynamic, the postures which have been used. So how did you build on that characterization?
You know, Khandar is my favorite performance. And when I say favorite performance, I feel that Khandar is the one film in which I've made the least number of mistakes. When Mrinal Sen narrated the 20-minute story to me, I was fascinated by it. And he captures now in that film exactly, he stirs that same emotion in me in those 20 minutes. This Jamini is just one of my favorite characters because in spite of everything, she's not a victim. And in spite of everything, she keeps her dignity. And that I find like really, really beautiful. And Jamini, I don't know, what was very interesting is that I did Jamini immediately after I played Mandi. So not only did I have to go through the physical transformation, I had to lose weight. But Khandar was the film in which I did the exact opposite of Rukmini Bai in Mandi, where I was very gregarious in Mandi. I was very over the top, and we used to go like 2 hours to the shooting site, and we used to all travel by bus, and we would be singing and doing all kinds of things on the way. It was very gregarious. And suddenly I found, without me thinking about it, it just happened that right after that, we were shooting in Bolpur. And I completely stopped socializing. I would come back from the set and I took nobody with me, no hairdresser, nobody, just me by myself. And I would be sitting in my room, listening to music, being by myself. And I realized that I was subconsciously trying to inhabit the world of Jamini, her loneliness, and what it was giving to her. So it was like a process of osmosis. I wasn't even aware that this is what I was doing. But for me, the most frightening thing about Khandar is that there is this last shot where, again, the face is against the ruins. When Nasir is leaving, and she's looking at him, and then you feel that her face is another ruin. Okay, there's it also on the posters that comes a lot. It's the ruins, the wall of the ruins, and then I'm just looking at him. And Mrinal told me that that's the first shot he's going to take. And I went crazy. I said, Mrinal, you can't do that to me. You can't give me the last shot. You can't. He said, you can scream and shout, you can do what you want, but that is what you have to do. I said, but this is really unfair. I screamed and shouted and all that, but I did it. And I realized when I did it that I had sort of just entered and inhabited the world of Jamini totally and completely. I had experienced the pinnacle of her tragedy. And then from there, I had to only go back. So in fact, I think that it was something that worked in its favor. So Bhaiya, the director, knows best. Kya karu?
Yeah. But how did you develop this relationship with the space? Because we see that the way you move.
No, I don't know. I'm not even aware. I would just say that is Mrinal Sen's doing. Because, it's difficult for me to say how I internalize certain things. But I think if the writing gives it to you, if the director gives it to you, if the cameraman gives it to you, then agar aap uski sachai, if you're looking at the truth, if you're wanting to find the truth, if you're not trying to base it on ideas of what it should be, you are just being that truth. Only then can it happen, I think.
But did you spend time in that ruin, like staying there or familiarizing yourself with that world?
Yeah, I did. And then also, small things like when I'm cooking and how I'm sitting and how I pour the water from the rice and all that Mrinalda used to show me how to do it. He used to show it to me. कि ऐसे करो. So then उसमें भी बहुत help हुई.
Okay, good. And also you worked with Mrinalda on, Genesis and Ek Din Achanak. So how was your working relationship with Mrinalda? Because of course we can see, he was also going into another phase of his making of, because earlier films were very different, and then these films were very different.
I never questioned Berlinale. In spite of the fact that we are from the institute, and in institute, of course, number one is Ray and number two is Ritik Ghatak, and then comes Berlinale and all those things we used to do as students. But I never questioned him. And I think he had a very tough time during Genesis because Om Puri and Nasiruddin Shah couldn't understand what he was doing, and they were very dismissive of him. I wasn't like I just felt all right. What he's doing doesn't make immediate and total logical sense to your brain at the time, but he's trying to do something, and I went along with him. मुझे एक बात उसकी बहुत अफसोस होता है कि there is a particular shot where I'm recounting who I am, and I'm describing that how there was a flood, and in the flood I saw everybody dying, and I saw my child dying, and I saw my cattle dying, and I had seen so much death around me that I decided to escape. So instead of doing, I can't remember why, but instead of doing it sadly, I decided to escape. Almost like I had beaten death at the game. Rinalda didn't like that. He didn't like that. He said that that's not working, and he didn't keep it in the film, which I feel very bad about. But I trust the fact that in the whole film, he must have suddenly felt that this would look odd. But the fact that it was in such a beautiful location, it was such an outstanding location, all that was nice. Then I did Ek Din Achanak. And for me, I remember that scene where I give up my father's books. You remember that? I give up my father's, all his books. And that is an acceptance of, all right, he's not coming back. And that for me was personally very, very painful, because in real life, I connected my father with books. Kafi Sahib was always either reading or he was writing. And for me, to think that I would one day have to give up all his books was just, I can't tell you, it gives me a sort of in the pit of my stomach even now. And I think for me, that was my most important moment. What Mrinalda told me is that you somehow managed to, which I'm not aware of at all. He said he liked my work in that film because he said that your eye had the charm of the, charm is not the right word, but had, I can't remember the word, but your eye had the cloak of the middle class Bengali. What he said is you as an actor tend to have a very focused eye, but something about this character was such that your eye had a certain cloaked look, which was important to the character. मुझे तो उसके बारे में पता भी नहीं है. He's the one who told me that.
Yeah. Now let's come to Earth by Mahesh Bhatt. This is also one film where I like your performance a lot in that film. Because also, this whole dilemma, the conflict of the other woman, but then the film is not about that. The film is about, the independent spirit of a woman, and how she decides to take charge of her own life. But the most fascinating, some of the scenes which I like in the film is, I like this saying of Stella Adler when she says that, acting lies in the choices you make. So there's where you realize about Indra's relationship with Kavita, and then you are on the bed, and then he gets hurt, and then you come, and we see that your state where your pallu is falling down, you don't even care for that. You tie the bandage, and then he wants to come close, but then you move away from that. And then there's another scene where you try to call Kavita, and then it's like two close-ups where we see you and Smita Patil in alternative close-ups. But what's fascinating for me is the way it's a close-up, and the way you play with the phone, and we see the whole state of mind, and plea that save my marriage. I just wanted to know about the choices. How did you make those choices in both those scenes?
I had no choice. What happened is that I had finished my work in art.
Yeah.
And then Mahesh rang me up, and in those days we used to work in 2-3 films at the same time. There were different shifts and all that. So he said, "What time are you going for work?" And I said, 9 o'clock. I have to go to Goregaon or something, Film City. Something. So he said, "Before that, you just come on our set," which was just 5 minutes away from my home. So I said, "Why?" So he said that I just need to take a couple of close-ups of yours. So I said, "What about my clothes?" He said, "Nothing. Don't worry about your clothes. Whatever you come in, you come there." So I went there completely unprepared, and suddenly I saw this scene. And I looked at him and said, "Are you stark raving mad? You expect me to do this scene without any preparation?" So Mahesh used to have a sentence, artificial conflict. He said, "Don't get into artificial conflict. You have to do this now, because today is the last day of the shoot. We are not going to get the set again, and we're just putting you against a wall." And this was when somebody else was getting ready in the other part of the house, Sunita Bungalow it was. And he said, "I'm just putting the camera on you, and bus, you just do it." So it was really because it was suddenly put on my head that I think I was trembling so much at the fact that this huge scene had been given to me without giving me a choice or a chance to prepare. So he said, "I want one mechanical rehearsal. I don't want you to emote in that rehearsal, because Praveen is on your face and he needs to see how you are moving." So I gave a mechanical rehearsal, and then they said, "Start." And I did the shot. It was the first shot. I finished, and in 10 minutes, I was out of that place. In 10 minutes, I was out of that place. And now, sometimes I think maybe that's the best thing that happened. Maybe if he had given it to me one day earlier, I would have stressed and felt, "Oh my God, this is such an important scene." It was just because it happened. So sometimes that also happens in film. And it was obviously, see, for an actor to beg is not a nice emotion. You want to feel good, you want to feel noble, you want to beg is a terrible emotion, because that has to come from within you. Now, because it comes from within you, you get in touch with emotions which are not nice. And that's very, very painful, isn't it? And so in that, I'm begging. I'm begging. And that's not a nice feeling for an actor. So I think that the fact that it happened so quickly and I didn't have a lot of time to dwell on it was perhaps the best thing for it. But yes, I know that ultimately it's about the choices you make, and the choices you make really come from how much confidence the director gives you and how much you get from the co-star. Acting is basically reacting.
Yeah.
And
if
agree. Your co-star is telling the truth and you're looking into his or her eyes, then that makes your work so much simpler. But I try not to be very conscious of this, because if I start becoming very conscious that, oh my God, I have to make a choice which is unusual, then it'll become, the whole thing about technique is that you learn the technique and then you must forget it. Because if I can see your technique as an actor, then you haven't mastered it enough. Ye technique ka jo chakkar hai na, I think people don't quite understand, because they say, what technique? You have to be spontaneous. Arey, how can you be spontaneous? You're not actually being spontaneous when you are playing a part. You are playing the spontaneity, but you're not actually being spontaneous, because you are taking care of the fact that the light, you must take the light over here, the mic shouldn't fall down. There are so many other things. So this construct of spontaneity and real spontaneity, how to construct that can happen when you have skill and when you have craft and when you have technique. I think technique is very important for an actor, but it has to be invisible. You shouldn't be able to see it.
Yeah. But, one is that, like you're in the moment and then you're reacting to the actor, and then whatever comes, it happens. And then some actors like do the backgrounding, they go into backgrounding and then they believe, and then it comes naturally. But then there are actors who also use things from their personal life, like emotional memory, something what has happened, and then they use that. So what is your way? Like, is it like a mix of everything, or like you follow?
Of course, it's a mix of everything, and emotional memory, most certainly. But see, emotional memory, which is what Stanislavski talks about, basically should be used only during your rehearsal period. You cannot use emotional memory at the time of the performance, because at the time of the performance, wo sachai kuch aur hai. है ना? Agar you use that emotional memory to feel that emotion and to know that you can reach it. Now, I'll tell you, there was a film that I did called Bhavna. And it was about a woman's struggle, etc., etc. And then her only thing in life is to raise her son. And she's now become an old woman. She served a sentence in prison. And she sees her son, who's now a doctor and stuff like that. And she's dying in his arms. This was being done at a public park in Bangalore. And now to be able to do that scene truthfully, while there are people whistling and clapping and trying to get into the camera, and there are 5,000 people who are trying to distract you, the actor has to get herself into a state of what is Stanislavski calls the public solitude, which means all those 5,000 jeering and screaming people have to go away, and there's just this mother and son. In order to do that, you have to sort of take the resource of your emotional memory, because otherwise you can get so distracted by that. And then some actors are like that they get distracted and they say, usko nikalo, nahi to nahi kar sakte. But that's not what a professional actor should do. So to be able to wipe out those 5,000 jeering and whistling people, and to get into that, I think happens because you develop through your craft, you develop public solitude, and you use emotional memory to focus and then play the truth of that particular situation. Kuch aasan nahi hai, let me tell you. It's not.
I know.
It's it's not
But it's
easy.
interesting how the way you're articulating it is.
You know, like I believe that all actors are neurotic. They have to be. You know why they have to be neurotic is because society tells you that you are supposed to keep your emotions deep down inside you, and you should not be very excitable, and you should not you should be able to control your emotion. You shouldn't scream, you shouldn't do your acting asks you to do the exact opposite thing. Ab aap mujhe Pushpendra, if you cast me in a film, you will tell me at the click of the camera, Shabana Azmi, emotion number 36 bahar nikalo. So I'll go and I'll cry and I'll do what? And then you say cut, and that is supposed to go. Or then you'll say start screaming at the click of a button. And I can't just start screaming. I have to prepare myself emotionally so that it's not fake, that when I'm screaming. So what am I doing? As an actor, I am keeping my emotion, I am keeping myself in a state of emotional preparedness. So they're right there in my throat. So as soon as the director tells me, I should be able to bring that emotion out. तो मुझे पागल तो आप करके ही रखोगे ना, नहीं तो मैं कैसे रह सकती हूँ? आप देखिए, और उसमें क्या डिमांड है? अब आपकी ये डिमांड है that you take me to the beach and you tell me that you're holding me in silhouette, and just as the sun is setting, my tear should drop from my left eye, and the sun is catching that because I'm in silhouette. And there's that, just that second. How much craft do you need for that? To be able to do that, that you got yourself in silhouette, your eye must catch, that eye must catch the sunlight as it is going down, and then your tear should drop. आसान है क्या ये करना? आप लोग ही हमको पागल बनाते हैं.
I can't imagine that, yeah. Then you talk about emotional preparedness. So how do you do that,
Well, I think for me, emotional preparedness is not difficult because I'm not a very introverted person. I'm not a very introverted person. I am an emotional person, and I think that's what holds me in good stead, because that's what makes me empathize. That's what creates a lot of compassion in me, the fact that I am an emotional person. Other actors have told me who in real life seem to be almost stoic. They say that actually acting gives them a release, because the emotions that they are holding back and not allowing to surface in real life get a channel through the character that they are playing. So it can work in both ways. It can work in both ways.
Yeah. Coming now to Vijay Mehta's Pestonji, it's again a very different character, like you playing a Parsi, but there's also a very definite graph in that film, that where in the beginning you're very romantic, you're very naive, and then towards the end, suddenly, you become very, like bursting out, like angry, and you also become a widow, and you play a piano also. So one can see, and then of course you speak the language also. So one can see that, there's a lot of preparation which has gone into that role. So can you speak about that?
See, the most important thing was to get the look right. So I had worked on the look, the hair, the clothes were done by Roshan, who is a great collaborator of Vijay Mehta. I was very happy to be working with Vijay Mehta. I had to learn the piano, which was an impossible exercise. I had an old Parsi who used to teach me, and my fingers would rise up and say, wrong, cut. That was very difficult. But to get the language, I had to work with Vijay Mehta herself, who is married to a Parsi. And so for the language, I worked a lot with her. But you see, what happens is, what is very, very important when you play characters like that is that there is very thin line between a caricature and a character.
Yeah.
What can happen is that you get so involved in that it becomes a caricature. So that thin line, that you have to be very, very mindful of. And again, I say, to a great extent, it is the director's job to see that you don't become a caricature. That's important.
Yeah, that's my problem with Anupam Kher in that film. He looks like a caricature. So,
But Nasiruddin Shah doesn't.
yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, yeah. You also doesn't. Also, it's suspension of disbelief. But you both look like authentic, but he doesn't look like. I don't know why that has happened in the film. Yeah, but then also the graph. I was talking about the graph of the film, where initially you're very romantic and naive, and then suddenly you change towards the end. And then the way the director shoot is, they don't shoot in order. They can shoot anything anywhere. So do you plan your characterization? How do you plan? How do you work in that sense?
I used to watch Nasir, and Nasir, I learned from Nasir. Nasir continuously reads the script. He reads the script like 5,000 times. In spite of knowing it perfectly, he still keeps reading the script. And my earlier thing was that I need to satisfy my director. Okay? So my har scene mein, I want to give 100% in every. Then I started watching Nasir, and Nasir would hold that temptation back, and he would build a graph that in scene number 70, he has to reach that 100%. So when he comes to 65, when he comes to 55, then how does he calibrate it? And that I learned to a great deal from Nasir. So it's not like you plan every single thing, but you know that there is an arc that has to be covered. And that I think also comes from so many years of training and being also a trained actor and doing so much work. I think it comes from all of that. Yeah. You have to build the graph in you, and you have to know what is the arc of the character. All that.
Yeah. Now coming to Fire by Deepa Mehta, of course it was a landmark film. It was the first mainstream film which dealt with the issue of lesbianism also. To approach that character, because it's set in a patriarchal world where it's, it's also suppression of desires, and then also a joint family. Also the way your character has been built. And I like, when I see the film, your name is Sita, and Nandita Das is playing the character of Radha. So of course, you can see that Sita was a subservient woman to Ram, and whereas Radha was very playful. So, she's played with that thing also. So what was your inspiration? How did you prepare for that role?
See, I remember very clearly that when Deepa was talking to me about the film, she said she's very centered. That word clicked with me, that she's centered. So even through all the hustle bustle that goes around her, I remembered that word helping me very, very greatly. And then Deepa is excellent with her actors. With me, she would coax me, cajole me, do everything but sometimes actors get a block. And then when you get a block, then you're stuck. But she would, just by talking to you and by being gentle with you, she has this knack of being unblocking you. And I think she loved my character very much, and so did I. And again, it's just the truth of it. But I must tell you, it was very interesting because she said we have to rehearse the kissing scene. And so we said, now, why do you want us to do that? Come on. And so she said, no, you have to do it. And I barely knew Nandita and I had to do that. And she said, kissing is not about just touching her like that. Okay, please be authentic, please be real. And so then she unblocked the consciousness we had about that. And then she was very careful that she almost did it in camera. There was just the cameraman, and there was one light boy, and there was her. All that also helped. Because we were also shooting not on a set, but in the heart of a place in Delhi. I can't remember the name, but in the heart of that place. So you're also conscious of what's happening around you. So she helped with doing those things. We were shooting on actual location. Yeah. I knew that she would treat this with sensitivity, that she would not sensationalize it. And so I think it's that trust that went wrong.
But as an actor, how do you deal with the intimacy? Because, the actors have to do intimate scenes also. So how do you...
It's difficult. I don't find it easy at all. And I'll go back to another film, if you allow me.
Yeah, please.
Early. Yeah. It was very early in my career that I was doing a film called Shak, where Vinod Khanna is the male co-star. And I was like really just coming in, and Vinod Khanna was a big star. And when I walked in before him, I saw Aruna and Vikas. Aruna and Vikas were a team at that time. And they were doing that scene for the cameraman. And I saw that it was very, very intimate, and they were rolling over each other. And my face became white, and I said, oh my God, how am I going to do this? This is like really too intimate. And then Vinod came. Vinod was a big star. Vinod realized very quickly that I am very petrified of this scene. Now, he didn't tell me, oh, don't be petrified, don't worry, it'll be okay. He didn't do anything of that. What he did is, when we started doing the rehearsal, he would take a position and then ask them that if I do this, am I covering her? Is my face covering, is my hand going to cover her face? And if I do this, I suddenly felt, oh my God, this is so technical. I don't have to worry about it. It's not about real intimacy at all. We have to give the impression of intimacy. And for that, I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life. That he was so kind and so sensitive, and he realized that this was something that was going to be difficult for me to do. Also, just see intimate scenes. Now we're talking about the 70s, okay? Today, everything has changed. Today, even if you say that you feel conscious of an intimate scene, they'll say, which world are you living in? So the atmosphere has changed.
Yeah. Also nowadays they've started workshopping, etc., to make actors comfortable. Yeah. But do you find the role of a director in such scenes like very important? In making it comfortable?
Very, very important in being sensitive and being particularly sensitive to the actor, and not treating the actor just like like an automaton, Being conscious of the fact that the actor also needs to be shielded and also needs to be protected.
And also you spoke about your blocks as an actor. So how do you deal with like blocks when you get blocked, with something? Because I remember once you were speaking about Sati, you were with Padma scene, and then you had this block. So how do you overcome that?
In Sati, I didn't manage to. And I continue to feel that I let Aparna down in that. I wasn't able to do it. But she keeps saying, no, that's not true, to comfort me. But I do feel that I should have done a better job there. But it really depends. It really, you see, when there is too much expectation from yourself in a scene, and when you've been preparing for it the whole long day, then inevitably you'll get a block. So what you need to do is you do not need to work yourself up the whole long day because you're going to be shooting at 4 o'clock in the evening. Now what I have started doing is I have not consciously getting the knot in my stomach because I know that this is something important. Now I think I am getting the ability to be able to really let it happen on the spot. Earlier it used to be difficult. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen now. I hope it won't happen in the near future, but I'm in a more sort of relaxed state, but prepared. There's a difference between being prepared and being anxious, and between being prepared and being relaxed. And I think a lot of it also comes from the fact that I've done quite a lot of theater now. And I think theater helps you with that, because you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And how do you get the emotional truth over and over again? So I think it comes from that.
Also, I wanted to talk about Godmother, again, another film, but a very different kind of role where, you play a female Lady Dawn. And your performance is also like very, in that sense, very archetypal, like there are all these traits of a macho, like her walk, the way she stands, the way she talks, the way she gestures. How did you approach that role? Did you, because it's based on a real life woman, Santokh Benjamin.
Vinay Shukla, who wrote and directed Godmother, is a very close friend of mine. And he explained to me something which helped me very much. He said the language is constructed, the reality is constructed.
Yeah.
The reality is not the reality of Manthan. It is the reality of Ganga Jamuna. That helped me a lot. So he said it has to be a more mainstream performance. It hasn't got to be a really authentic performance because uski zaban bhi waisi nahi.
Yeah.
That helped me a lot. And then I noticed, in retrospect, I've noticed that what happens in Godmother is that when this role is thrust upon her, she doesn't know what to do. So even when she sits how she has watched her husband sitting. She imitates her husband because she doesn't know what to expect or what to do. So she starts imitating her husband in the way she speaks and all that. When she really starts getting power, she becomes much more languid in her body language. And it comes from her own sense of power. So the body language in Godmother is very, very interesting. It comes from this, okay, you imitate. And also, this thing I find, why does she sit like this? Because I think that as social beings, men have been taught to widen the space that they occupy. So whether they're standing at a pawn shop or wherever they're standing, they sort of, occupy the space around them. Women have been told that it is important to behave like a female, which means what? Close your legs, close your, cross your knees, make yourself not so broad, occupy less space. And so that's what we do because we've been socialized like that. But when Rambhi Bain really starts experiencing her power, then she starts occupying more space in a way that is more languid than she does when she was imitating her husband. So it's an internalization of when she realizes that, all right, she's got power. What she does with it is interesting. But this I thought only in retrospect. I didn't think of it when he was making the film.
No, but interesting choices. Yeah. Okay. It's also very interesting to see your filmography, that you worked in parallel cinema, art house cinema, you worked in foreign films, and also you worked in hardcore mainstream Bollywood with Desai also, films like Anthony, Parvarish, Fakira, etc., etc. How do you balance these goals? Because the working styles are different, the films are different, the acting styles are very different.
At the same time that I was doing Par in Naihati, I was also working in a film called Kamyab with Jitendra, in which I was saying Dhakkam Dhakka Laga, Pyar Bada Pakka Laga, and from there straight going to Par. So I mean, I don't know how you have this completely schizophrenic personality that you keep. And I remember when I used to work with Manmohan Singh, and if I took time or a pause, तुम्हारा art film acting नहीं चाहिए, मेरे को commercial cinema चाहिए, would be very distasteful. But the thing is that it is a completely alternative reality. It is, tell me, how can you bring any credibility to a fact that 3 brothers are giving blood to their mother, like in Amar Akbar Anthony, except that it is a willing suspension of disbelief. That's the only way it can work. And I think for an actor, it is also important to be able to do this whole range. To see I can only do realistic cinema is limiting yourself, right? As an actor, you have to think of it as an alternative reality and function within that. And it paid me very rich dividends to be able to do those films, because Parvarish became a hit and Amar Akbar Anthony became a hit, and all that also adds on to your value as an actor, because then you're also a star. And when you're a star, then you're actually helping the whatever you want to call it, the parallel cinema, whatever, more. And I used to also feel Avatar was a big hit. I used to always feel that there shouldn't be this very strong division between art cinema and mainstream cinema. That actors should be able to do both. And you're seeing more and more that this is happening. A lot of mainstream actors are now doing films which you would think that they wouldn't have done otherwise. They would have found it too risky, etc. So I think it's good what is happening.
Okay, so coming back to the contemporary times, one recent performance was Nirja, where you play the role of Rama Bennett. Also, it was very interesting to see again a graph, and then this contrasting part where in the beginning you're just an ordinary housewife, but very cheerful, motivating. But then in the end you rise to the occasion, and then we see this final speech which you give. So it brings me to this whole idea of a monologue. An actor has to be prepared for a monologue. So how did you prepare for that final monologue in that scene?
My mother was very unwell and she was in hospital. And I'm staying in the hospital with her. And I didn't have a room because she was in ICU. So they don't give you a room. So I used to sleep outside the ICU in that chaise lounge that you have over there. And also have a bath in the common bathroom over there. And in that state, in fact, when Ram Madhwani came to speak to me about the monologue and said that, do you think we should cancel it? I said, no, just go ahead and do it. And so I left my mother there, and I came on set, and it just happened. It just happened. So sometimes I think what is happening in your personal life can also accelerate what you are doing, what is required of you. Of course, this is not a very desirable thing to happen to you, but I think I knew that it was a very important, that the performance really rested on that. But I wasn't I wasn't so knotted up from inside, because see, it's even more difficult than just doing it, because he did one take and then he did several takes because he had to take it from different angles.
Yeah.
That I find the toughest for an actor, because your front you have done, then you do from the profile, then you do from the back, then you do the 3/4. So you, to bring about continuity by facial expression, all that, because normally in the first take that you do, you give it your everything. Then it starts becoming a mechanical process. Now, how do you calibrate that mechanical process should still be live and throbbing? I can't give you a clear technique for it, except for saying again and again, feel the truth of the moment, feel the truth of the moment.
But no, it's very interesting for me that, you said before or earlier also that, you have to catch the silhouette and then the teardrop should fall. So, and, so that you can light also. So in a monologue, it's a long piece. Of course, as you said, that Taneja Sahab used to say that, learn the lines by heart, learn the lines by heart. And then also, but don't learn them by preparing them, like that, you stress it here, like you make a pause. Right. Yeah. So, but then when you have to shoot it like from 8 different angles and you have to maintain a continuity. So you've given a pause there, and then you've given an emotion, release of emotions there. Then how is that thing, like in different takes?
See, the important thing is that the first take you give. For me, playing against the emotion is always a more interesting choice. I could have been crying from the word go in it, and it wouldn't have been wrong, because the mother is in such a state. She's facing people for the first time publicly after her daughter has gone. She's also had a breakdown when the coffin was brought just before this of her daughter, right? So she has to attempt a certain control of her emotions, and she's talking about things, and she's playing against the emotion, and then she doesn't know at what time it slips out of her. So I think less is more is what Taneja Sahab always used to tell us. So that less is more, then you have to discover when does it slip out. And if it has slipped out at the correct time, then you have to keep that in mind, but it cannot be an imitation of what you did. Because if you're merely imitating, then it won't ring true. That's, I think, where your theater experience helps you a great deal, because you are then able to repeat that shot without trying to imitate what you did in the shot earlier. So you know the broad graph, but you have to find something by which. मेरी माँ हमेशा कहती थी, my mother was an actress, शौकत कैफी, and she said वो अंदर की मशीन चलना चाहिए. वो अंदर की मशीन अगर आपकी नहीं चलेगी, and if you're just imitating what you did earlier, it'll stand out. So complicated है. complicated है, उसको मैं बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं analyze कर सकती.
Yeah, so as we're coming to the close, I would like to ask you, what do you think of the cinema and the digital medium which has come up and the kind of content which is coming up nowadays?
I find it a very interesting opportunity. You know, there's a director called Anup Singh. I think you know him. His film Qissa is so beautiful, so beautiful, so beautiful. I was so deeply moved by the film, by cinematography, by its music, by its performances. It was just, आप मेरी उनसे सिफारिश कर दो कि मुझे ले लें फिल्म में. Please.
I consider him my teacher, you know. So
on a big platform.
And I had the privilege to assist him on that film. Yeah.
हाँ, तो please बोल दो कि मैंने सिफारिश, आप सिफारिश कर दीजिए मेरी. But what is happening now at the moment, I'm getting a bit disturbed because I think it's going into a formula. OTT is going into a formula. So it has to have like a murder mystery. It has to have sex. It has to have violence. It has to.
Yeah.
Now, I think we are losing a very important chance by fitting into this formula because, my God, it gives you so much freedom. It gives you so much freedom. See, although I understand that, of course, things have to make commercial sense because ultimately, film is a very expensive medium. It's not like painting, which just needs a canvas and brushes, and then the artist can do anything. The returns you have to see. But in that process, we cannot always want to cater to the lowest common denominator. We can't do that. We moved out of film into the OTT because we said, all right, we don't have to cater to the lowest common denominator. And that's precisely what we are doing. So we are losing the opportunity of something that can give us huge, huge, huge choice. So I hope that we take cognizance of that fact, because there are just wonderful things that one can do with it. And I really, really respect filmmakers who are willing to raise the bar, and the bar is not based only on commercial choices. I think that's very important. एक section तो होना चाहिए ना, किसी भी art में एक section तो होना चाहिए जो कि rises above the lowest common denominator. Otherwise, how will art ever be owned?
Yeah, but also I feel it's the role of the government also. Suddenly we see, they've come up with these new rules. They want to censor everything. So, and I feel it's suddenly they're limiting everything down to that, common denominator,
Absolutely, absolutely. And the new thing that they're bringing about in the Cinematograph Act is that if after the film has already passed the
censor board,
after that, if somebody objects to it, the state will have the authority to call it back. So then why do you have a certification board at all?
Exactly. Yeah.
What is the meaning of that? And you really, firstly, the format that we have in India is that's for film I'm talking about. That is based on the British system. So you call 30 people to be on the board. And they are people who have the dispensation of the government that is in power. So basically you're telling me that every 5 years, my morality will be decided by the dispensation of the government. How is that possible? You have to give filmmakers. So certification is different from censoring. I wish this would be understood. That of course filmmakers are responsible people, and they can decide and say, no, I realize that if there is this material which is not appropriate for children, then I will opt for a certificate where children will not be exposed to it. But all that today, in what is happening, there's nothing left really. Yeah.
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 So to come to the end of the masterclass, you said that your father used to say that art is a instrument for change. How important do you think is actors to be aware about what's happening around, what's happening, and then to react to it?
I think because I do it and because there are other actors who do it, I cannot be a guru and tell every actor that this is what you should do. People should have the freedom to make the choice they do. But I think because I believe that the resource base of an actor should be life itself. And that will necessarily make you connect with the politics of the place, with the social context of the place. And it can't but happen otherwise. You can't stay in this bubble and say what's happening in society around you doesn't affect you. Of course it does. And you are an influencer. You are somebody people look up to. So I think you should use that constructively.
Yeah, it's a wonderful idea to end the discussion on that. Thank you, Shabana ji, for the masterclass, and thank you, IFFSA, for giving us this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you for watching my work so carefully. Thank you very much.